Hey, what's up, y'all? It's Matt, Dlux, DluxFab.com. Today, we're starting on building our Perra Loca mini builder's kit. So I'm going to show you guys how to build this from the ground up. Today, we're starting with the rear axle. So you got all my parts laid out here. So, well, here we go. Starting with the spool. This is, we sell spools from other brands, but typically if you buy our axles, these are our spools. We make them and we use them for us. We don't typically list them on the website because we need them. So, Dlux Fab spool, Vanquish ring and pinion for the rear. So let me open that up. So I'm going to move this camera a bit. So here we have our spool and our ring and pinion screws, shim if need be. They put a bag and a bag and a bag on this stuff. They want it secure, I guess. Which I understand. Hope y'all are having a good day. I can't complain. A little rainy today and chilly, but we're getting there. Alright, let me get rid of this trash here. Get this out of the way. Now, as most of y'all know, this is how it goes on the spool. Like that. It doesn't go like that, because it can't. It goes like that. Now, find my right driver. Now what we're gonna, on these spool bolts, these bolts that connect the ring gear to the spool, we got our red Loctite. A lot of y'all have already seen me do this. I'll put a dot of Loctite on one of the parts bags. And that's how I'll put Loctite on these screws. Make sure to start all 6 of these before you crank any of them down, because otherwise they'll fight you. They can. And like I said, on this stuff, I don't ever hope to not have to touch again. I'm using red Loctite on these. If you have to get it apart, it's not a big deal. Just use a little heat. A little heat will release the Loctite, not a big deal. A lighter or a soldering iron just right on the head of the bolt will release that Loctite. You don't have to use all of the force. You can just use a little bit of heat. Now I got them all started. We're gonna go through and crank them all down. This is an underdrive set for the rear of the mini builder's kit. Those kits come underdrive rear, standard front, and there's correct me, I think there's 28 or something percent in the OD4 transmission. So if you want more than that 38%, you can get it if you want it, but we found that to kind of be the sweet spot. So I think that's all 6 of them good and tight. Let me check them again. All right, there's that. Now next, we've got our bag with our DX4 or our high clearance center section here. So we'll get to that here in a minute. All the hardware for that's included in that same bag. We're gonna set all that right here, but we got to prep these bearings. So we're gonna start with let's see if I can zoom this out a little. That's even better. Nice. I'm gonna see these 4 bearings that come in the bag. Now, for the 2 sealed bearings, the bigger sealed bearing goes on the inside here. Gotta to get in there straight. Sometimes that can be a challenge. If it's fighting me, I'll put it in like so. And then drop it home. There you go, that's in there. The other sealed bearing goes on the outside. Easy peasy. It's a little burr or something there. Use my shock pliers, just lay across here and shove that home. I'm sure she's seated good. Yeah, it feels pretty good. Set that aside. Now these bearings, you see they're open. You need to pack these like you would old school wheel bearings on a car. So I got a tub of grease here. We're gonna do this the old-fashioned way. What grease is not? Some people are grease snobs, some people are not. So just gonna use that. Just take some grease right here in my hand, smush it down on there. Take these bearings and you're gonna cut them in just like that. Hopefully y'all can see this, because you want to push grease through the bearing. See right there where it's kind of coming through? That's what you want. You want grease shoved clear through the bearing. A couple ways you can do it the way I was doing it. Kind of cut it in. And turn it and cut it in. Just like you would an old wheel bearing. You turn it over. You can just jam it down in the grease like on your finger and mush it in there. Basically, you want to make sure that you got grease all through inside of those bearings. So we're going to go ahead and stick that on here for a second. Where it lives. Wipe that excess off. Put that back in my other hand. Grab the other bearing. Repeat the process. Now you might be able to just throw some grease at these, but I would rather pack them up like a good wheel bearing, like you would on a full-size car or truck or whatever. Boom, we got that one gooped up. Slide her home. I'm going to take the rest of this grease, scoop it up with my finger, and we're going to smear that around on this ring gear. This may be a little excessive on the grease. You probably don't need as much as I'm using. You definitely don't need more than I'm using. But I'll kind of load that up like that. Make sure we get it all the way around. Also gets almost all the grease off my fingers. We'll set her down right here on the plastic. Let me get my rag. We'll clean my hands off here. Now that's prepped. Now, more grease on my hands. I thought I got it all. Alright. Now we got that all prepped. We're just going to let that sit there and set aside. It'll drop in here when we're ready. Next move. We're going to set this on there just to establish our top, because the axle's going to sit like that. Then you're going to line these up. These truss bolt holes, they go on top. So hold your axle more or less like so, and then you'll identify which way it fits in there. There, that one started. Set that aside again. Grab the other one. Now these fit a little snug by design. You want them tight. So, you guys can see this. I'm just going to ram this home. Sometimes you got to give her a little tappy tap. Sometimes not. That one might need it. I'm just going to set this on the table. I'm going to give it a couple light slaps with the, I'm going to use a driver handle. I'm not going to go crazy on this. Go real gentle like. There, took a little doing. We got one side lined up nice. The side went first, so all four of those holes are lined up good. those get these countersunk bolts right here. So we're gonna go ahead and red Loctite those too. We don't want to have to fiddle with those or ever have them come loose. So we're gonna put red Loctite on those. We're not gunning them all the way down monkey torque tight yet. We're just starting them on the one side, because I still got to get the other side hammered down the rest of the way. Now, you guys who want this stuff tight, so a little bit of a press fit, i.e., I'm pressing it with a you know, a hammer, but still same deal. You want this stuff to be good and snug fitting so it'll hold up. So I'm just going to snug these 4 right now. Just more or less snug. Because we got to tap the other side all the way home. Now more tap it, tap, tap. Alright, got the other side tapped in. Let's get our bolts in it. So again, red Loctite on these. You don't want to have to touch this stuff again if you can avoid it. Alright, those are all started. Got a little bit of flashing in there. You want this stuff tight fitting, but we gotta clean this out of there. We can't have that just laying in there. Alright, got that flashing out of there. So now, our next little step is here. I'm gonna grab some bolts. We're going to make sure that all these line up before we crank any of that stuff down tight. So we can just lay our truss on here, look it down it. Yeah, that all looks good. So we're going to go ahead and attach this truss before we crank all that. No, we got to crank some of them down. It's all straight. Let's gun it. Let's just send it. I think it's fine. Man, these threads are just going into aluminum here, so you don't have to go crazy. Just good and snug, and then let the Loctite do its job. Now, for whatever reason, as you're building this, if you come up to this point and those aren't straight for you, let's say these are just a hair off one way or the other, before you tighten these down, you can reef on this and get a little bit, play one way or the other. And then you could set it straight with this and then tighten all these down to hold it all minty and straight. Because, there's different tolerances on parts. You're going to have to do a little bit of tweaking now and then to get it just perfect, but this one lines up minty. So next step, we're gonna go ahead and install our ring and pinion. Get that out of the way. Drop her home. Got her good and greased up. Got our ring and pinion in there, our ring and the gear in there, and our locker. Drop this home. Let's go ahead and put this together. Got this shim here. If I end up needing it, I'll come back and put that in later. Right now, I don't think it's necessary. Let's get our 4 bolts in that hold the third member in. I'm gonna start them all by hand, then I'm gonna use a driver to send them home because no one wants to watch me turn these bolts all day. Always do these in a crisscross pattern. Check them by hand. Feels good. Sweet. All right. Let's move on to the truss. Got our bag of truss hardware right here. We dump that all out right there. So now if you look closely, you can see, if you can see it or not, we'll get a couple of them. The crew at the shop already put a little bit of red Loctite on these for you, on these little truss screws. We went to a smaller thread for these holes here because we ended up doing the math. With a smaller thread, we got more thread engagement than with a bigger one with this thickness of material, blah, blah, blah. You understand. Now, also put the smaller driver on it. I'm going to go ahead and add more red Loctite because I don't want any of this to move. I don't want to have to touch it or wiggle it or wonder if it's gonna. So we're gonna use more thread locker rather than less. Now once again, you're gonna start all these before you crank any of them down. Ah, sausage fingers strikes again. Getting red Loctite everywhere. Now, like I said, on these truss screws, red Loctite. You don't want to have to touch these again. And if they get loose, they'll waller in this housing and they'll pull the threads out. So make sure you keep these good and tight. So now we got all 6 started. We're gonna go across and tighten them down. Good and snug. Like I said, then let the Loctite do its job. Now, we added this support ring. I don't know which ring. I think we call it a support ring. That slides on the front of the third member, front of the hog head, however you want to look at it, front of the diff. Just like that. And it puts all that under tension. So, slips on like that. That's a machine piece. Oh, looks like I gotta get that tapped on a little more. Alright, so you just learned with me. We need to start with these. I said start all the screws and I missed one. I didn't start that front screw. So we're gonna back all these off a smidge and start that front screw before we tighten all this down. All right, guys, this fit tight. Took some wiggling to get that started, but we got it. I loosened all 6 of these truss screws, and I give this a little tappy tap. You can see I kind of nicked it a little bit tapping on it just to make sure that this collar was seated all the way. But now we got it all started. So we're gonna tighten all 7 screws down together. So that was just a little snug to get in there. Not impossible, but you do kind of want that joint somewhat preloaded. That way it helps keep it tight. And then we'll come back and tighten this one last. Now you got 7 screws holding this truss axle assembly here together. That's good and stout. It ain't going nowhere. The new truss design compared to the older truss design is pretty nice. We first updated this and then we added this later on. Excuse me, folks. As we go, there'll be small updates to the kits as we build them. As we build more and more, we learn more and more, and we see how things go. All right, moving forward. Next step up. Axle shafts. Here's our bearings for our outers. Some spacers and some screws here. So we'll set those aside. Pour this out. So here's our rear axle shafts. Guys, these are titanium. They're not steel or anything. See, this is a magnet. It's not sticking to it. These are titanium rear shafts. Drop it in, send it home. Now refer to my other rig. So then your bearing goes on. These little screws here. I'm gonna go ahead and use red on these two because there's not much thread engagement. And these screws hold in your outer bearing. M3 by 4 or something super short like that. Repeat the process on the other side. And we still kept the 8mm stub shaft size. Yeah, that's the grease in the locker. We kept the 8mm stub shaft even on the Mini. Guys, keep this stuff just as strong as we can make it. We know you guys are rough on this stuff. Oopsie. Whoopsie ding dong. I forgot this bearing. Can't have that now. So, keeping that 8mm stub shaft keeps it good and strong. Also, if you're using 8mm on all your other rigs, it keeps your hubs, all your hubs the same, so working on it's easier. Next up, we got our hubs and our pins. We're using these brass hubs on the back just to give this thing a little bit of rear weight to help keep the back of the truck down when you're going down. It also helps keep it stable. So, need a different driver for these. So these are M5. But first we'll do this. So, got your bearing in, got your screws there, return your bearing. This little spacer goes slides on. And now we'll line up our hubs. These are brass. If you look, these are drilled for 2.5mm and 3mm. We're using 3mm pins in about everything. There's only a couple things left that use 2.5mm legacy style pins, but we've moved to 3 in just about every rig there is. Slide your hub on. Flat face goes outside. The raised collar, that goes to the inside. Pretty self-explanatory, but you know, I gotta cover it. So now if you look at these pins, one edge will be chamfered a little bit, just a little, that side. You slide that in there, find its home. Come on. Don't you know where your home is? Use a driver to tap it, tap, tap. I know you're lined up. Alright, that wants to play mean. Let's see if it's the, sometimes, let's see, that side's fitting. The other side's a little snug. Now, if you run into that, take your driver, like this one, where there's a little bit of flashing in these holes where that pin doesn't want to go through. Just take your driver like this and turn it around in there. You can use that to get those little burrs and stuff out. You see a little burr that came out outside there? Now we'll check our pin again. Oh, see, now she goes through there minty. So there's just a little burr there catching us up. Line up our 3mm hole. Squeeze her home. Click. Drop our pin in. Gotta hold the other side so I can. Oh, woo-hoo-hoo-hoo. About flung that pin off into orbit. There she goes. You push this pin on down. Now you're going to want to check. So that pin goes through. If you're not careful, that pin will interfere with your hub screws here and here. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to grab a couple longer screws I have here. And then we're just going to run these in on both sides of that pin to make sure we have that pin located. See, the screw just dead stopped when it hit the pin. So we're going to push this down a little more from this side. Too much. Perfect. And we'll run this in. We'll run it in past the hole there. Now we'll turn it over. We'll push this pin down to where it touches that other screw. Now we should be good to go put our set screw in the end. Little red Loctite on that. You want that, you don't want that coming out, losing your pins. Now that pin can't go anywhere. And we know that our screws are both clear on both sides for our hub screws. Now the chance of using hub screws that are that long to hit that pin are pretty low. But if you do, you can run those through too far. See, that one's that's good. And tear your screws up, tear your threads up on your hubs if you just don't have that pin quite centered. So we're going to take our driver here. So we're kind of ream this hole out a little bit. Make sure there's no burrs. Spacer. 3mm, 2.5. There's the 3mm. Straight up. Drop her in there. Pin home. Come on. There it went. We're going to start this other long screw. Where did I put it? Right here. We started the pin on this side. We're going to start this long screw on this side. We're going to run it till you see it come through that other pinhole. Boom. See it's through there? Now you can take your driver, push this pin down the rest of the way, let it touch that other screw, not super hard. See, we've almost used that red Loctite up. Run that home on the end of the axle shaft there. Now with this bolt in here, you got something to kind of reef on, to grab. And there's your hubs. Now, if you want cheap insurance, you could put a strip of heat shrink around this. So if these set screws ever do loosen up, you know, yours are contained with a piece of heat shrink or whatever. But yeah, so there you go, folks. There's your rear axle for your La Perra Loca mini kit, builder's kit, all built out. So long screws, short screws, those are for your links, shocks and all that. But there's your rear axle, all built up. You guys got any questions? Put them down below in the thingamabob. We can discuss it. All right. See ya.